And now I would like to welcome to the stage Ms. Amy Burnett, our keynote featured speaker.
that we can be living as all the time. So what are those layers? What's that clay and plaster that we're covering ourselves with and hiding away? Well, one is fear, that we're not safe or that we're not fully supported. So Charles Fillmore, in The Revealing Word, says that fear is one of the most subtle and destructive errors that the human mind experiences. Fear is a paralyzer of mental action. It weakens both the mind and the body. Fear throws dust in our eyes and hides the mighty spiritual forces that are always with us. And you may have heard the acronym used that fear is false evidence appearing real. Because often it's an emotional response to an imagined threat, right? We're walking around in fear of things that have not yet happened or things repeating that maybe we have had happen in the past, but they're not actually happening in this now moment. It's false evidence appearing real. Another thing that we might cover ourselves with is shame. Shame is different from guilt. So we can experience guilt if we regret an action that we've taken. We recognize that we've hurt someone or ourselves in that action. That's a feeling of guilt and can be a healthy way to help us recognize when we're not in alignment. But shame is when we internalize that to believe that we are wrong, we are unworthy, we are inadequate. Unresolved shame prevents us from believing that there is gold underneath all the clay. It keeps us from believing our inherent good, our inherent worthiness, and the unconditional love and support of the divine substance that's all around us. Another thing we do is we like to control in our humanness. We have sometimes a resistance to trusting divine order, and instead we're trying to run around and manage everything from our human understanding. And when we hold tight to those solutions that we want to use from our human understanding, we close ourselves off to the divine guidance waiting to express through us. I'm reminded of a cartoon I saw online of like someone running around doing all of these things, and it says what my guardian angel is doing while I'm running around in my humanness, and the guardian angel is like tapping his foot, like, I'm waiting. Like I've got the answer right here. I've got guidance to give you, but you can't hear me right now because you're scurrying around doing a bunch of things, and so I'll just wait until you're ready. We also tell ourselves old stories. Some of them we've been told. Does anyone have the experience of having like a generational family story that's been told and you don't even know why you believe it, you just do because it's been the mantra in the family since as long as you can remember. Or we sometimes create stories about ourselves. So those are often things like, I'm not smart enough, I'm too old, things don't work out for me, things don't work out for my family, oh, it's just always been this way. And these are things that are not the truth of who we are, but they are thoughts that have been repeated so often that they form a layer of that shell around our divine self. And we have to break through to get to the divine inside. So in Lessons in Truth, Emily Cady writes, God is not a being apart from you. He is the very spirit of your being. When we forget that and we start identifying with the clay, which we in Unity might call error thinking, right? False beliefs, we start trying to earn what we already have. We do things trying to earn love, success, or divine favor. Again, we run around. We wear ourselves out, right? Doing things to make ourselves worthy, to make other people like us, to feel successful by someone else's definition or by society's definition. But the truth is that we are already the full expression of God's love, period. That was true yesterday, it's true today, it's true tomorrow, and every tomorrow after that. That we are a divine expression all the time. We are light. That's why I love that song. I am light. Always, period. And it's anyway, India Ari is like such a truth teller. If you don't listen to more of her music, I would encourage you to do so. So what if we ask ourselves today, what layers am I ready to release today? What belief about myself no longer serves my awakening? We tend to think about these things as we move closer to a new year, right? In Unity, we have some really lovely ceremonies. We'll do the burning bowl ceremony, and we'll do the white stone ceremony. And we'll think about what is it that we want to release. And that's a great practice. But really, it's an everyday practice. We don't have to wait for the new year to examine ourselves and think, what am I willing to release today? What is no longer serving my awakening? And we have to remember that uncovering the divine isn't about striving for perfection. It's about surrender or gently allowing. So what are some ways that we can start to uncover and break away this shell of plaster and clay that we're hiding under? So one way is awareness. So we can see the clay for what it is. We can begin noticing our thoughts and emotions without judgment. When we catch ourselves in fear or criticism, we can pause and ask, is this a thought based in truth or based in fear? So in Sacred Abundance, Robin encouraged us to take a look at key areas of our lives and the beliefs or thoughts that we have. And so areas that she mentioned was your body or your appearance, your behavior, messages about money, messages about your value in the world. We could also add things like health, our relationships, vocation. And it's an interesting exercise to really sit with one of those things and ask yourself, what do I think about my value to the world? That was a big one during this class for me. Like, I don't know that I had asked that one in a while. So what do I believe? What beliefs do I hold about my value in the world? And I know for me what I found was some of the beliefs that came up that I wrote down initially, as soon as I wrote them on the paper, I thought, that's not truth. How is that still knocking around in there? That's not anything that I want to be living from on a daily basis. And so we were, asked to contemplate each of those areas, notice if they were negative or they no longer rang true. And then she suggested anything that didn't ring true, that if you hadn't already written a new thought that felt more like truth, that you sit there and think of what would you like to replace that with? If that no longer rings true for you, what does ring true today? And so an example would be a thought around money, that there's just never enough. Never enough money, never enough to go around, can't get to the end of the month, those kind of thoughts. And you might write or think instead, the universe is unlimited and there is more than enough to fill my every need. That's a beautiful thought to live from, right? That feels expansive, that feels empowering. And so what you can do with that is notice anytime that old thought makes an appearance and then replace it with the new thought, until the new thought is so firmly anchored in your consciousness that that old thought doesn't have a place to live anymore. And we don't have that coming up. You can also be part of someone else's awareness. So this is where it comes in to, like, when you notice something, when you notice the light shining through a crack for someone else, that you mention it. One of the stories she talks about is as a young girl, having her brother make fun of her for singing. And he made fun of her voice. And so she went for years with the story and the thought in her head that I'm not a good singer. No one wants to hear me sing, I'm not a good singer. And one of the things that kind of broke through that awareness for her and allowed her to create a new thought was, as an adult, being in a church and kind of singing in the background of a choir, and the choir director saying, "I don't know why you don't sing louder. You have a great voice." She said she was shocked by that because no one had ever said that to her. And then she realized she had never really allowed anyone to say that to her because she closed herself off. She put a whole bunch of layers of clay over the light of her voice and had this story that she told herself often, that I'm not a good singer, I don't have a good voice, nobody wants to hear me sing. So we can be the chisel or the hammer for someone else to widen a crack when we see something shine through. We can pay them a compliment. We can tell them what we're seeing about them that lets them know that they are divine on the inside. It's really distracting, sorry. And so the thing is that awareness brings light, and when light comes in, shadows start to disappear, right? Or we can embrace the shadow. We're no longer afraid of what's in the shadows. Sometimes it's about embracing what was once in the shadow, or still loving ourselves even in the shadow. Which brings us to forgiveness. So forgiveness is our next tool of uncovering, and it helps us to soften the hardened areas of clay. So it's one of our most powerful spiritual tools. And when we forgive others, ourselves, the past, we're chipping away at the hardened crust of resentment and guilt that we might be carrying around. And so we have to remember, and she reminds us in Sacred Abundance, that forgiveness is not saying that a behavior that happened is okay. It's saying, I release this story so that I can now be free. When we forgive, we're acknowledging the Christ in each and every one of us, and we can forgive the person as we are reminded of their original blessing, even if we cannot condone the behavior that they were expressing at the moment. She uses the popular phrase, forgiveness happens when we give up hope for a better past. And so, we all kind of went, in our Wednesday class, we really talked about that for a minute. Because if it's already happened, is it ever going to change? No. So what use is it to spend our energy carrying around anger and resentment and digging it up over and over again and then looking at it and talking about it and bringing up the emotion and the feeling and all of the things that impact our now moment for something that's already happened and that we cannot change? She talks about that it's like putting a kink in the hose of substance. So if we think about substance and flow and our divine abundance flowing through a hose, and that unforgiveness is like picking that hose up and putting a kink in it and then being like, where did the water go? Where's the flow? I can't get anything to come out of this. And we've done it to ourselves, right? We've created the kink. All we have to do is release it. And the flow is just right there, strong as it ever was, maybe even stronger than it ever was. And so as we forgive, cracks appear in the clay, and they allow our God light to shine through. We can also wash away the clay through regular spiritual practice, like affirmations, prayer, meditation, being of service. And so I think one of the things that I have been learning more and more along my journey is that it's not necessarily the form of the practice that's important. It's the result or the benefit that you're receiving from it that's important. In our UWSI classes, we explore our old thinking and patterns of belief and all these things a lot. And one of the things that I've mentioned a few times is that when I first came into Unity and first started learning about affirmative prayer and meditation, I was really concerned about the form that it took. because I wanted to do it right. I wanted it to work, so I wanted to do it right. So I had these ideas that like you had to have the perfect words for your affirmative prayer, and that for meditation to be effective, that it had to be at least 15 minutes, and I had to have a special spot in my house that I would sit, and I needed to maybe have a certain candle that I lit, and I needed to have all of these things be kind of in the right order for it to count as meditation. That was my own stuff that I was putting on there. But what it did was made it so stressful to try to pray or meditate that I found that I wasn't doing it at all. Or I would only do it very sporadically, and then I would layer on a whole bunch of guilt about why I wasn't doing it more frequently. And I was creating all of this stress and worry around something that was supposed to help me uncover my life and let me shine. So what happened is at some point I thought, you know what? What if I meditate for 1 minute? Like, I'll work my way up. Maybe I'll just meditate for a minute. And then I started to notice, like, oh, hey, I have these opportunities in my day. Like, I live in Ozark and work in Branson. So I have like a 35-minute drive to and from work every day. And I thought, oh, what if I don't turn the radio on my way to work, and I just let my thoughts be, and I brush away things that aren't serving me, and I focus in on things that are helping me pave the way for my day to be phenomenal. Or I found on my XM radio the spa station and the watercolor station that have these beautiful instrumental, like, light, fun, and they're great for just letting your mind go wandering off and see what comes up. And what I found was in those moments, I started having things bubble up that I thought, oh, I've never thought of it like that before. Or, ooh, that's an interesting idea. Or that sounds great. I think that's a project I want to get started. And so it was finding something, like, I have to drive to work every day. And so I could turn that into a spiritual practice of being in those moments. Sometimes it's just, like I said, it's literally 1 minute of going, oh, I feel my body all scrunched up and tight, and like, I need to take 10 deep breaths. And so sometimes I just shut my door, and I sit in my office, and I take 10 deep breaths, and I just breathe in, God is, exhale, I am. And then I open my door, and I go back to doing what I was doing, and it always feels better. And what I found is now I create all kinds of little ways that I'm connecting with the divine inside throughout my day, when before I was lucky if I was getting in like 1 15-minute meditation a week, because I had created all of this hardship around making it happen for myself. And so now it's really fun to find little moments and little ways to say thank you and acknowledge the divine presence in my life. And really what that is kind of some sacred self-compassion, right? It's loving the human experience. It's embracing the human experience and stopping that harshness with ourselves in the name of spirituality to get it right. I think we have a lot of people that really are striving for that connection, but they are in this hardness of getting it right. It has to be a certain way. It has to be the right words. It has to be on a certain time or at a certain day. And nobody else's practice can be right. Only this is right. And so if you start talking about, one of the assignments we've had in several classes is to take a meditative walk or a connection stroll. Like they've called it all sorts of things, where it's like adding that movement and going and being out in nature and just noticing what you notice when you let go of all of the stress and worry of the day and just focus in on the light within and being connected to that. You suddenly, instead of hearing one bird, I think I hear like 3 different kinds of birds. And now I hear the wind rustling through the trees. And that feels really cool. It almost feels like whispers of things coming to me. And so all of this to say, Whatever feels good and right to you and makes you feel connected and helps you remember the light inside, that is a practice that is right and perfect for you. And don't let yourself or anyone else tell you otherwise. Daily stillness, it's in that stillness that we remember who we are. And we've talked a lot in our classes about if you do something and you get to that place of stillness and you feel that inner peace, once you know what that feels like, you can get back there in a million different ways. And so that's kind of what all this other practice is about, is anything that gets you to that place. Sue used to talk about that she had programmed herself that when she held her fingers together, that was a signal to her brain, and she had done that through training of when she felt that stillness and peace, she would hold her fingers together really tightly. And so then what she could do is in a moment of stress or worry or whatever, she could just, even if other people were talking to her, she could hold her fingers together in that way, and she could feel that energy wash over her body. So you can create any way that feels good to you and gets you to that place of silence and stillness inside that reminds you who you truly are. We also, unity prayer is, it's not about pleading for something to change. It's about aligning with the truth of our being. And so we don't go around saying, oh, God, please fix this and please fix that. But what we do say is, I am part of divine wisdom. Divine wisdom is guiding me at all times. I am strong in spirit. Peace flows through me. These are affirmations and things. You don't have to create, I always wanted, like I said, I wanted to create these perfect affirmative prayers. Oh, I'm going to find all the perfect words, and it's going to sound so great. And if anybody heard my prayer, they would be so impressed with my affirmative prayer. It's performative, right? If you don't feel it, if it's not coming from the core of who you are, then it's not aligning with the core of who you are, and it's not pushing you into the flow of life and love and abundance and all the things that are inherently ours through our divinity. And so saying something as simple as, divine wisdom guides me now, that is a prayer. It's also said, if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, that is enough. I think it's so fun now to go through my day and find all the little ways that make me say thank you out loud. Through this Sacred Abundance class, we've been talking about all the different ways, and I've talked about sometimes it's about getting that primo parking spot in a crowded parking lot. It has been about, like I said, I do work in Branson, and certain times in Branson, I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but sometimes the traffic gets a little crazy, especially on 76. And I've had multiple moments over the last 6 weeks where when I pulled in somewhere, there was just cars as far as I could see, and I thought, oh, left-hand turn. And I'm like, all right, it's gonna be easy. What if it's easy? What if it works out? And I've had several times where there's a couple of cars in front of me, and they kind of have to wait a second to go, and then I get up, and it's like the seas have parted. There are no cars, and I get to just pull right out, and I always just laugh and say, thank you, I see you. There are just all sorts of ways that abundance shows up. And sometimes it's huge ways, and sometimes it's those small little ways. But when you find the small ways to feel gratitude throughout your day, then the universe says yes to that and starts putting more things in your path to say thank you for. We also can use service and loving action. So that's us expressing the Christ. And the more we serve, the more we experience that oneness. When we love others, it somehow makes it easier to remember our source as well, right? That energy starts to buzz within us. And as we give, we realize, this is who I am. I am love in action. And that feels really good. So I'm going to invite everyone now to join me in a moment of meditation. So get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes. Begin to take some deep, relaxing breaths. Breathe in, let it go. And just feel yourself resting into the quiet center of your being. Imagine yourself as that golden statue, radiant, pure, perfect. And notice the layers of clay that may have built up over time. The clay of old stories, fear, unworthiness. Now with each breath, feel that clay begin to soften. Feel the cracks start to emerge. Breathing in light and breathing out limitations. Silently affirm, I am the light of God. I am whole. I am radiant. I am love expressing. Now imagine that golden light within your heart expanding. It's shining through your entire body. It's touching your thoughts, your emotions, your memories. It's transforming everything into light. As the light expands, see it radiating out into your home, your relationships, your community, the world. And affirm this truth in the silence. The light in me is the light in all. In the silence. And gently bring your awareness back. Feel your feet, your breath, your heart. Feel that light emanating out in all directions. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So really what we're talking about today is remembering that we are exactly what we need in our lives. We're exactly what the world needs in this now moment. And we can ask ourselves, how can I bring the magnificence of God, Spirit, creation, the divine, whatever it is that you choose to name it, into the world in a greater way today? What am I willing to release today that is no longer serving my awakening? How can I be a brighter expression of the divine love and the divine substance that is the core of who I am? Living from this place and allowing that gold to shine as a catalyst for abundance, for miracles, for us to watch what love can do in our lives and in the lives of everyone around us. And that's really why we come together here at this place called Unity of Springfield, right? So it's about coming together and allowing our light to shine and connect to all the other lights here in this room. And I like to imagine that when we're here on a Sunday morning, or when the meditation group is here on Sunday evening, or when we're doing a class during the week, or when the Abraham group is here on Saturday morning, any activity that's going on in this church where we bring our energies and our light together, I like to imagine that there is like a beam of light shooting out of this building and blanketing all of Springfield. I've joked before, like the bat signal, right? Like the Unity, like bing, like it's a beam of light. And that we are calling to us all of the other energies, all of the other lights that are looking to be love in action. And so I really like, you guys know, I like imagery. I like things that will remind me, and we talk about like different practices. And so if you saw out there, there was a basket of these little candles. And so the reason I asked you to take a little candle is my hope is that you would take this and you would put this someplace that you'll see frequently. If you have a little altar at home, or you have a place on your desk, or wherever that might be. And we have the shiny little gold heart on there to remind you that you're gold. Your gold is shining through. You are gold, pure gold on the inside. And that, you know, you can light it or not light it, but just the visual of seeing it. But I do think they're pretty. They're like a little flicker. And so I would suggest turning it on once a day or whenever you think about it. And just, that's something. That could be a practice, that you sit and you look at that light and you just say to yourself, I am light. I am pure divinity. You could get the lyrics to that song and you could use those as an affirmation to remind yourself. And I like the thought that we'll have all these little candles around, and that because we are all here together and we're feeling this connection together today, that when one of us turns that light on or is meditating on that light, that it will emanate out and touch each and every one of us, and we might get a little divine nudge to remember that we are that divine within. And I was thinking on the way here, you know, what would be different if they had never investigated those cracks on the Buddha? What if they immediately went, oh goodness, we have to repair these cracks, and they didn't look beneath the surface? They didn't do that though, right? They went with faith. As soon as, I'm sure that there was at least one person standing there that thought that monk was crazy to grab a hammer and a chisel. You're going to take a hammer and a chisel to this artifact that is hundreds of years old, and you're just going to start hammering away at the possibility of what lies underneath? Yes, right? We say yes to that. We say yes to anything that starts to pull away that clay for ourselves. And then we keep these practices going so that if we feel a glob of clay smack on us, we go, ooh, nope. I'm not going to resonate with that. That's not who I am. I'm going to brush that aside and remember that I am light. So in closing, friends, your divine nature is not something you earn. It's who you've always been. It's who you always will be. And in each moment of silence, each affirmation, each act of love, we're just going to keep removing those layers until our inner gold shines freely and nothing can stick to it anymore. So your task is to notice where the gold is still covered with clay. Stop identifying with the clay and see yourself as only the gold beneath. And shine that big, bright, beautiful beam of your Christ nature out into the world, and let's see what love can do. Namaste. Thank you. So now we're going to call our ushers forward. And this is our time in our service that we get to choose to show our infinite gratitude for our many blessings. Please join me in the offertory blessing. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive.